webinar. I can't recall how I came across Wunderhaus actually, but I was intrigued by their proposition. And I thought they had an interesting offering for self-builders, custom builders and developers looking to build carbon negative homes. So whether the architects on the call agree will be interesting. So it'd be good to get your input here. Before I ask Nico to introduce himself and Wunderhaus, could I ask you to keep your mics on mute? You normally do, it's very good of you, but please use the chat function to raise any questions. Nico's going to take us through Wunderhaus proposition, but do ask any questions at any point and I'll ask you to come off mute and Nico will be able to answer them, no doubt. So you know the score, and the more questions you ask, the less you have to hear from me. So I will stop sharing my screen. Let me ask Nico to introduce, well, Nico, good morning. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for taking up your time to talk with us. Yeah, over to you. Please introduce yourself and looking forward to hearing about Wunderhaus.
Good morning. I am Nico and I'm an architect, and I was asked to share our exciting journey of the last 5 years with you, and I'll try to do that now. In order to get to Wunderhaus itself, I think it might be useful if I give you a little bit of a background of how this all came about. I came to the UK in 1984 and very wisely decided not to practice architecture, which I studied in Geneva, because I never wanted to deal with clients. And I started a contemporary art gallery in London. And but then life intervened and the divorce and other things, and I had to go back to what I learned, which was architecture. And I was very fortunate. The first clients I picked up in London were foreign clients who looked for contemporary light open spaces, and all they could find was two up, two down. And we must have done a good job at the time, because these very same clients then had a loft in New York, a house in Tel Aviv, or penthouse in Kiev, and Milan, Zurich. We ended up working all over the world. Very fortunate in terms of the kind of designs that we could execute. But as you probably all know or can imagine, very difficult clientele, not easy people, the high net worth individuals. And aside from the fantastic designs, which I'll share with you in a minute, that we were able to execute, it also was not as fulfilling for 3 decades as it should be, because these people don't really have homes, they have possessions. So from a design point of view, it was exciting and super. From a content point of view, on a human or social level, maybe not so much. So I share some of that work. This year was an apartment in downtown New York between Broadway and Thompson. It was a penthouse, and the client very much liked Japanese culture, so we reflect a lot of this in the architecture. It then was one of the most published properties we ever had, and that had to do that he sold it to a woman called Heidi Klum, and she had a lot of big parties there. That was in New York. This one here was probably the biggest planning achievement we ever managed to get. It was a penthouse where we put a swimming pool on top of a roof terrace in Westminster. Getting permission for that was an unbelievable achievement. I don't know, I think the images of you are in front of what is crucial, because they're covering Harrods. It's next to Harrods, overlooking Hyde Park, this project. And it's a different world. This is a 5-bedroom penthouse that sold for £90 million. So completely other end of what we're doing now. This one here was a project we did in the Greenbelt in Totteridge. Again, was really cool planning achievement, because there was a 3,000 square feet bungalow on that site. And we managed to get permission for this 15,000 square feet house. And this house has 27 acres of land in London. Not bad. This year was super penthouse in Kiev. I have no idea if it still stands. sadly. This one is a project we did in Zurich, on top of overlooking Zurich and the lake at the Dolder. So that gives you a little bit of where our background comes from. And about 5 years ago, I had this silly notion that I'm still feeling young enough to do something more meaningful. And we fired all our billionaire clients and haven't earned a penny since, but had a lot more fun than before. And at the same time, so the basic idea, the basic notion that we had was we wanted to use our expertise in architecture design and space design to bring good architecture in the UK to a much wider audience than these high network individuals. At the same time, I had a realization, and this is really the overriding philosophy, and therefore very important that I share this with you before I introduce you to the product itself. It's a realization that is quite odd if you think about it. So if you imagine from when you get up in the morning to when you go to bed at night, every single thing you touch, from the underwear to the toothbrush to your watch to your car to even the food nowadays, every single thing, morning to evening you touch, is a product. As a society, we have completely embraced the culture of product with very good reason. The product has a lot of good virtues. Number one, of course, it needs to be required by a lot of people. Number two, it should appeal to a lot of people. Not every product appeals to everyone, but it should appeal to a great number of people. Number three, super important, a product is researched, developed, tested, and it will perform as it says on the tin. And number four, the biggest, by far the biggest virtue of a product is economy of scale, scalability, i.e. if you look at the products that are depicted in this image here, if you would ask somebody to build you one iPhone, it probably would cost you millions and would not work very well. But because they can produce millions of it, you can buy it for £900 and it represents fantastic value. And that's the same really for all of these products. Oh, actually, it's the same for any product. Economy of scale or scalability. And the odd thing is that there is one exception in our life. It happens to be the most complex thing, the most expensive thing, the thing where we spend most of our time. And this is our homes, our houses. So we construct them. We construct them every time from scratch. And it goes wrong every time to some degree. You who are architects will know that, and it has nothing to do with your ability or with the construction firm. It's just too many variants and unknowns for it to go right every time. A good example is, for example, a car. The car that you drive probably has around 30,000 parts. A house has a minimum of 60,000 parts, up to 300,000 parts. It would never cross your mind to go to your local garage and say, "Hey, Johnny, build me a car," because you would know it wouldn't be very good, and or at least not as good as the products that are around. But we do that with our houses. Those who are not architects, if you don't believe me, you have to look only at any of the 220 episodes of Grand Design, and you will know that bankruptcy and divorce and an unexpected child are definitely part and parcel of the journey. So our goal really is to produce or to come up with a product in form of a house. Of course, and I say this to my architect colleagues, this is not a formula for everybody. Good individual architecture for individual projects will always exist, but we are trying to solve a number of problems that we have in the construction industry by creating a product or product line that is researched and developed, that is tested, and in time that will produce represent extreme good value for money. Exactly those virtues that I described earlier of a product. Now, in order to do that, the journey is quite different to the journey we were used for the 3 decades when we designed individual projects. Normally, it would take us maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks to design a house. This now is 5 years in the making, and we just concluded the process of signing off what we consider the first product. What you see here as an image is just to illustrate what I said earlier. We are really, on the whole, the construction industry, because in the UK it is a very, very different market segment or market situation than in the rest of the world. In the UK, we are really stuck in very old, outdated building technologies, architecture. When you see what the 6 or 10 big developers who, as you know, are a cartel in this country produce, it is very like this picture here. There will be still living room, dining room, no open plan living. As you can see, very often you find garages that still are sized by 1950 standards and none of those big SUVs that people have fit in. But somehow they are very successful. And the reason is, of course, and you will know that too, that the 6 or 10 big developers in this country are a cartel and they're shortening the market artificially. The 6 top actually sitting between them on 1.2 million plots with planning. And I say sitting because they're shortening the market on purpose so that the demand is higher than the supply. And that explains why they can sell this really poor quality in architecture, materials and performance so successful and make so much money. And of course, that industry, that segment will not change their ways until they have to, because they have a winning formula. Why change that? They are not caring about the environment or the energy crisis or climate crisis. How catastrophic that reality is, that ignorance is, I can illustrate by telling you that the average new build in the UK scores 84 points EPC, and they're all cheated, as you know. So that's barely scraping into B and really poor. Much more shocking than that is that less than 2% of our new builds, so last year 230,000 houses, less than 2% reach 92 points in the EPC, which is low energy. So less than 2% of our new build homes are even low energy. Forget about zero energy or zero carbon. That's super scandalous, but it will not change because unfortunately this cartel is also very powerful in terms of donations to political parties. And we are lucky with our venture because now with this absolute acute climate crisis and energy crisis, the public starts to become really, the pressure from the public becomes bigger and bigger. And I think we will find in the next half decade or so that even the big construction firms will have to change their ways. Of course, what is depicted here in the traditional form of building, masonry construction, and lots of wet trades and individual things, you will know probably, if you're from the industry, that you cannot achieve an energy efficient home with these construction methods. Ironically enough, this is actually the only construction method that is classified as standard. Everything else is classified as non-standard construction, which is actually very sad, in a way, very laughable, because this should be the other way around. This should be non-standard because it's terrible. Now, on this journey to create a product, the first thing that we had to decide upon was on an architectural language that will appeal to a lot of people, and an architectural language that's relevant in terms of the architectural landscape of the UK, and indeed we decided also of other countries. And the architectural language that we decided upon is something you could call modern barnhouse architecture. The reasons why we did this is, so a barn is probably, after the cave, one of the oldest human forms of habitat. It doesn't go back to Victorian, Georgian, Queen Anne or Elizabethan times. It goes back to something called the Longhouse, which goes all the way back to Neolithic times, or 8,000 BC, 8,000 years ago, 6,000 BC. You can see here an image of a longhouse, model of a longhouse, 6,000 BC, and next to it is a model of our Wunderhaus, and you can see that we are definitely the most traditional new build in the UK, going back all the way to 6,000 BC. We changed the materials a little bit, but other than that, it is based on that. Of course, it's also like a child would draw a house, and that means that people can still associate with that form, architectural form, as a home. We're not claiming at all that the architecture is something in itself incredibly novel or innovative. Indeed, you will know that if you Google that modern barnhouse architecture, so you will find many individual projects that exist on the same premises or lines, indeed look very similar. Our approach was then the next step. Well, once we decided on the architectural language, we could have, of course, designed some amazing space egg, but that would have narrowed down the appeal to and the number of people it would have attracted. So anyway, that's what we came up with. The next thing we did is we spent a lot of time, and this is my personal fortune, that I don't know, slightly autistic when it comes to space. I'm very good in rationalizing space in a functional way, but also in a sensational way, the way people perceive the space once they're inside or outside it. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the ideal layout matrix for our houses, a matrix that maximizes functionality, usable space, and the way the space indeed feels. And we came up with quite a, there must be an image somewhere, yeah, quite a unique matrix. It's the same on the ground floor as on the first floor. There are customization options in terms of bedroom sizes. They're quite flexible, from very small to very large bedrooms, but other than that, the matrix is the same. And indeed, it stays the same, whether it's a 2-bedroom, single-story house, or a double-volume, 8-bedroom, 2-story house. The matrix never changes; it just repeats itself in our case. Also unique about, it must be coming somewhere, about our houses, all of our house models, they can be detached, semi-detached, linked detached, or terraced, always the same house model. Now, quantitatively, in order to see that the space feels right and feels good, you have to come and visit us. But to give you a quantitative example on our house products, as part and parcel of our product, our houses, the 4-bedroom model that we have here as a prototype in East Sussex, you will know that new built houses notoriously in this country have no wardrobe space. Our 4-bedroom house has, as part and parcel of the product, comes with the product, 21 running meters of customizable system wardrobes. That is the equivalent of 2 London double-decker buses of wardrobe. And that's illustrated here. It has to do, of course, with the fact that we have no apertures on the side, which also explains why we can have all these different detached, semi-detached, terrace, and so on forms of the house. You see here an image that is just illustrating the open plan living that we have in Wunderhaus. Our research also went into what people require, and we based a lot of that on other people's research, because obviously we don't have the means. One of them, for example, a very large research by Savills, examining the 4 main reasons why people want to purchase a new home. aside from location, which we can't influence. And they found that age group 25 to 45, their number one reason was open plan living. Number two was contemporary architecture. Number three was energy efficiency. And number four was low maintenance. Interestingly enough, amusingly enough, segment of the society where I belong to now, the age group 65 to 45 had exactly the same four, but exactly in reverse. Their number one was low maintenance, number two was low energy, number three was open plan architecture, and number four was contemporary architecture. We are, of course, in favor of this trend that everybody talks about nowadays, which is called MMC, modern method of construction. And whilst it is not really defined what that is, people associate it with large parts or sections of houses being built under controlled conditions in a factory and then being transported on site and having a very short installation time. Of course, we support that in the sense that it is much better than what was depicted earlier, the traditional form of on-site construction. However, in our research, we came to the conclusion that we don't think that is the solution for the future. And I give you briefly the reasons for that. In this country in particular, the self-build market in the UK constitutes only 7% of the total market, whereas in the rest of Europe, in Germany, for example, self-build market is 85%, completely different. And because of that, from a business point of view, our target market can't be self-builders, but is small to medium-sized developers. We're not ignoring self-builders, but it's not our main market. Now, developers in this country are also called house builders. They don't want to buy a house, they want to build a house. And that is why we have an unusual business concept. We are selling the intellectual property, if you like, the recipe and the cooking instructions of our houses in form of licenses to individuals or to developers. It's a bit unusual kind of business form. The reason why we don't follow the MMC is that in order in the UK to do MMC, you need a huge original investment in a factory, typically 40 million plus initial setup cost. But that's just half of the problem. The next is that you have to get that factory running every day of the year in order to make it viable. And that requires a steady stream of housing projects. The only people who can do that are, again, one of the big developers. And indeed, some of them are following that route. It needs a huge investment. It needs a steady stream of production, but it also has other disadvantages. One is numbers. Even if you have a very big gigafactory, you're very limited in constructing very big parts of a house in these. Let me just find the right image for that. In these, there is an image where it illustrates that you're very limited in the numbers you can produce in the factory of it. The next thing is, of course, that you still need to construct the houses. They don't construct them by themselves. They need then to be inspected. I think Bopas does that in the factory because the building regulations can't visit the site when they have to see as these things, how the fabric is put together. And of course, very often you have problems with site access to bring these parts onto site. But really another negative in my book is unless your house is of relatively small nature, you're really limited in the type of architecture you can achieve. Because normally you're limited in with these parts in what fits on the back of a lorry, which typically is 5 meters in width. As you can see here on that image, that's very typical. So it's all right, but it's very difficult to achieve something architecturally exciting with these dimensions. It's for that reason that we really went a different route, where we said we have to go similar to, I have a picture somewhere, sorry, I'll find it. Yeah, we go similar. What we want to do is modular system construction, or unfortunately, what is a dirty word, it shouldn't be, is the kit house, which means basically parts are made for our house specifically, that can then be very reliable and easily be assembled on site in a very short amount of time. I illustrate this iPhone because nobody ever talks about an iPhone and say, "Ooh, it's a kit phone." There's nothing negative about kit, it just has somehow gotten a negative image about that. So that's what we are doing. All our parts are made specifically for Wunderhaus, and once the groundwork on foundations are established, a 4-man team can put Wunderhaus together with a telehandler in 15 working days. So relatively quick. And after 15 working days, you have a watertight envelope, meaning walls, roof, windows, internal floors, internal walls are all up. That means you have factory conditions, but you don't have to pay rent. You can stop and start. You are not limited in the amount of units you can produce, which is vital, because I come to that a little later. We do want eventually, we hope to achieve that economy of scale, i.e., by producing very large numbers of our houses, being able to drop the price considerably. But I'd like to go back briefly to that journey. So architectural language was the first thing we had to decide upon. The next thing was the matrix. I already explained that. And the third thing, of course, and I have to put my hand up, when we did houses for very wealthy people, we never considered the environment or the energy consumption at all. Would have been quite futile anyway. And like everybody else, I've always read about eco houses and zero energy houses and zero carbon. And so it came as a big surprise to me when we started this journey to find that there is nothing out there on the market. I mean, nothing, zero, zilch, nada, that is anywhere near energy efficient or ecologically sound. Of course, there are individual projects by people who are passionate about it, but there is nothing a normal person can buy that is anywhere near those criteria. That was a surprise. And the next surprise that we had was, once we started to make ourselves knowledgeable, and we still have a lot to learn, I'm sure, as we can, about the subject of ecology and energy efficiency and technologies, that whilst we have thousands and thousands of new companies providing energy efficient products like air source heat pump and MVHRs and solar panels and energy storage, they always only know their particular subject. So the guy from the air source heat pump, he knows everything about air source heat pumps, but nothing at all about an MVHR or about solar panels or about energy storage. But of course, all these things have to work together in order to really create anything that works energy efficient or environmentally correct. So that was quite an interesting journey, and maybe a good thing that we were so naive and so had to basically start from scratch, because we ended up coming up with some pretty cool solutions, which I'm sure if we would have engrossed already our brains in that industry for a longer time, we wouldn't have been able to think so much outside the box. Here are just a few more images. You see our open plan living. This actually is a CGI because somebody wanted to have a house, wants to have a house on the seafront. This is actually the view he's going to have once it's built. Just to give you a bit of an idea, we have a 7.5 meter internal double height space in there. Now, it took us 3 years of research and development to come to the stage where we could build our prototype home. And when we built the prototype, we had, of course, a lot of grand design moments. A lot of stuff went completely wrong. That was part and parcel of building a prototype, is to try and test things. And of course, we went out there trying a lot of crazy stuff that looked great on YouTube and was a disaster in reality. But the prototype did achieve 2 things. Let me just find a picture of it. No, that's not it. It achieved a few things, and that is, it validated 2 of the main criteria that we set out to achieve. Number 1 was, we got, I hope you're familiar with it, a very, very prestigious design award, the Red Dot Design Award, which is decided by an incredibly eminent panel in Singapore of people who really know what they're talking about. So that, if you like, validated the quality of the architecture itself. And the next thing was that we achieved with the prototype home an EPC of 101 points, which in Sussex is the highest. The next house can achieve considerably more. I come to that a little later. So energy performance and architectural quality was validated. But we learned a lot building the prototype. And one of the realizations that we had is that, like at the prototype, for the previous 30 years, we designed staircases and kitchens and bathrooms and all of these things ourselves. And indeed, we did the same on the prototype. But of course, we all of a sudden realized we've been there the last 3 decades when these houses or our own designs were implemented. With the business model that we have here, where we're selling the IP, i.e. the recipe and so on, instructions how to build a house and what to do with it, we're not going to be present all the time. And that realization then was, well, if we have any process in the construction and assembly of our product that requires a very specialist skill or a specialist skill, it can go wrong, and it probably will go wrong. And when it goes wrong, then people will say, ah, look, Wunderhaus doesn't work, the product doesn't work. So since building the prototype, we've now spent a further 24 months, and indeed just concluded this process, of looking at every single element, literally every single screw, every single element of the house again, with the prospect of saying, without compromising the quality of the design or the material, we have to achieve a level of certainty when these things are put together, that we know that the outcome of the assembly is always the same standard and quality, of course also the same price thing. And that was quite a difficult task. That's why it took 2 years. I'll give you a good example. I'll show it to you later. We had what you see here on the front and the back of the house. We used a actually very cool product. We used a spray-on cork render, which is colored through and through, is very flexible, is ecologically unbelievable, made out of cork. It is a really very cool product coming from Portugal. But when we put it on, it was a one-man team. This is what they have, their distribution system here, a very cool one, the product in the UK. And the guy came and he put it on, it was fine, but it was a windy day. And that stuff sticks to everything forever. Glass, you name it, aluminium, doesn't matter. And the cork granules, the spray went onto the roof and the PV foils that we have. And I had 4 guys for 3 weeks on a cherry picker, scraping it off and damaging the roof. And this is a good example. The product is fantastic, but if it can go wrong in that sense, it will go wrong, and we can't have it as part and parcel of our product.
Hey, Nico,
Yes.
from a product perspective, I mean, it looks fantastic, and obviously it was great to go through that journey. And I know you're now in a position where your prototype is going to be vastly improved on when you come to launch. We're starting to get some questions, and actually some of the questions chime with some of my pre-prepared questions in terms of moving on from the product side of things, but the practicalities of not finding the land so much, but also when it comes from a developer perspective. Simon just asked a question, Simon Matthews asked a question about, have you funded your work to date? Well, obviously you're still launching Wunderhaus out, so no one person has developed out a Wunderhaus yet, but in terms of funding, having the knowledge that if someone can get a mortgage on a Wunderhaus, for instance, how is that? What can you advise people in that instance? So is it easy to get finance on a Wunderhaus because of the nature of the product?
So we had, of course, already conversation with NHBC and with LABC and with mortgage companies, and from the very outset of this project, we've been very well aware that we have to satisfy all these criteria. That means that every method that we have in the construction, every product that we have in there is either BBA approved, or it has the strict criteria of NHBC taken into account. We are just doing it. We literally concluded last week our last design elements, concluded the design process. We are only now in the position where we can submit it, and we will, to all of them, but we had previously already conversations, so we are absolutely 100% confident that we are going to fly past all the criteria they have. I come to some more specific answers where you can ask questions about specific elements of the house. So we are very confident that house will be not just having the warranties of all the big warranty providers, but also will satisfy all the criteria of mortgage providers. We changed actually a good number of elements within the envelope in order to fulfill this criteria. So for one example, the cladding, which is very popular, that you see here, people love it. The cladding that we used in the prototype house is made out of WPC, and it's not really fire rated enough. And whilst by regulation and law, you don't have to be having a fire rated facade up to 18 meters or 6 stories, we know, or we are aware, that the providers, the warranty providers and the mortgage providers have the prerogative of saying, no, we're not going to ensure that. Therefore, we changed our new facade. You will see an image in a minute. Roof, and indeed also the render that I was just talking about, will be made out of very cool fiber cement panels, which are A1 fire rated. They can't get moldy, they don't deteriorate, they can't fade, and so on. So we are very well aware of that, and we will get it, but you're right, we haven't been there yet. We have sold this year 10 licenses. By the end of the year, we hope to sell 50 or 100 more. So there will be, in the first quarter of 24, we'll have the first developments finished.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know funding is not a sticking point. That's the wrong thing to say, but it's definitely much an issue. And also when it comes to
other thing, sorry to interrupt you, one other thing, as you say, the funding, because I didn't answer it completely. One of the good things for self-builders, not for developers, one of the good things for self-builders, because you know that most self-build mortgages have these stages of releasing funds.
Yeah.
The biggest stage of releasing funds is once the superstructure is up to water tightness, and that happens in our case in 15 working days. So you get funding as a self-builder, the full funding, pretty much at the beginning of your journey.
Yeah, and then something, I mean, the passive house guys on the call might be able to answer this as well, but the fact that there is no masonry in this house, that can sometimes be an issue for more traditional lenders as well. It's
called non-standard, but I can't fix something that's completely idiotic in this country. That's the way it is. I'm not going to build masonry because people want it. Masonry goes back to the Romans, and indeed they use better cement we do now. So no.
Yeah, it's still it does shorten the list of funders available, but I presume that will be the same for any timber structure. Alex, did you want to come off mute and ask your question just so I don't have to keep talking, or should I read it out?
Hi, I have lots of questions about it really, but I'm interested in how the design takes into account orientation and views and solar gain and things, because obviously the windows are predominantly at one end. How that works on a variety of sites, and considering, I say, views, solar gain, losses and things in that area.
So we have, as you see, we have no apertures on the side, and we have a 2 meter overhang on the house model. You see here a 2 meter overhang on the rear, where the big window elevation is, and a 1 meter overhang on the elevation you see here on this one, which has very distinct advantages when it comes to light pollution. We have very little light pollution compared to other houses, and you have actually a reasonable little solar gain, except for middle of February to middle of March, when the sun stands quite low. That's the only time where you get actually very intense direct sun exposure if you're indeed south facing. Our solar gain, as far as the our next generation house will have, I come back to that in a little while, but it will have 20 kilowatt of PV roof, which is way in excess of what it needs. And quite frankly, the orientation, therefore, so we have way excess energy in the next generation house. And
it's not really about energy though, Nico, it's about having views. I mean, normally with architects, well, the main thing you're doing is you're trying to design a house to make the most of its location, and it's how that works with a jelly mold design.
You're right. So the views, of course, depend where your house is, and the orientation depends where your house is, and of course, if you like, in that sense, if you have only 2 sides that have vista, you're limiting the ability to have it on 4 sides for sure. But we have so far not encountered anyone who has perceived that in any way or form as a negative. Is there more questions, or shall I go on talking? Or?
Sorry, I missed that, Nico. Alex, was there anything else there?
Well, I'm interested about, obviously, as someone that works in passive house land, had you considered designing and modelling using passive house specifications, or I mean, I guess it's impossible to do that because of the orientation issues. Well,
all our criteria in terms of, let's say, insulation U values, whether it's windows, our windows are 0.79, our walls, external walls are 0.9, our floor is 0.12, our same with our roof. We fulfill our air tightness, at least in the prototype, first try 0.6. We fulfill those criteria of passive house, but we are not trying to. We didn't take passive house as a measure. I'm a big fan of passive house because it's the only standard that actually has numerous has quantitative measures against it. All other names, eco house and all of that, they are meaningless. Passive house has a definition, but we didn't take that as a must. We fulfill the technical criteria, not in terms of orientation, but in terms of U values and so on, easily. But so if somebody with the right orientation says, I want to spend £1,500 and have a passive house accreditation, they should be able to get that with Wunderhaus without a problem. But it's not something we didn't take that as a. But
it's very specific on orientation, isn't it? Because if the large glazing area was west facing, the house would probably overheat, wouldn't it?
Well, we have comfort cooling as well. We've taken care of any kind of overheating.
Right, okay.
So the way we heat and cool the house, because obviously we don't have time to explain everything, the way we heat and cool the house is quite a, well, I haven't seen it in the UK. We heat and cool the house only between the air source heat pump and the MVHR. In winter, the warm air is trickling in with the fresh air, and we can reverse the air source heat pump in summer, and you will get comfort cooling to the level of 6 to 10 degrees differential to the outside.
Nico, in battle, which orientation is
south north? So our main big window is full south.
Okay, cool. There's a question here from William. It might be a bit too specific, and I'm not sure if it's relevant because of you're not necessarily live yet. But William asked, do you have type warrants for installing houses in Scotland?
No, but we have at the moment we are in discussions with two. Scotland is slightly different. Their regulations are different, and their whole system is a bit different. But we are in talks with two different, quite large parties who want to have an exclusive franchise in Scotland. And I haven't really looked myself into it because I'm hoping in the next couple of months or so to decide who we partner with, and then we'll probably tackle that with them.
It was interesting to hear about. I mean, it would be quite handy to find the source of the Savills report, but I mean, just I get that people are going to be demanding contemporary architecture, open plan living, low energy houses, low maintenance. I mean, that does make sense, especially in this day and age. And I know you said you weren't focusing on self-builders, but interestingly, and I know people live in Bellway homes and Barratt homes, and they all look like rabbit. They all look the same. If you were to get multiple self-builders on a plot, but they're essentially having the same structure, do you think that would work for self-builders? Because these houses are quite distinct. So to have, when you have your developments as well, your developments like these high-end, well, they'll look like high-end developments, where every house effectively is the same, and it's potentially their dream eco house. From a research perspective, I was just wondering whether people would like something bespoke or whether they are happy to live in something that looks like their next door neighbors.
Unfortunately, I can't put it up now because I'm not smart enough, but we just had a very good CGI executed for the first multi-house development, which is going to happen here nearby us in Bexhill. It's a five house development, all the same, and it looks stunning. My answer to that question is the following. The perception, it's quite ironic that a lot of people ask me that, the perception that something that is repetitive could be not look right or poor is coming mainly in the UK from everything that is bad architecture in post-war, the big developments of 100 houses, Taylor Wimpey and so on. And I understand that fear, but I say it's ironic because the UK in particular, more than any other country, has a history of good architecture, generic architecture that manifests itself very beautifully. Let's take one of the most expensive areas, real estate areas in the UK. Go to Belgravia, Eaton Square. All the houses are the same, Cupid designed them, and nobody ever has said, "Oh my God, they're all the same." Or Victorian architecture, every Victorian street, Pont Street in London, or so on. I think that it has to do more with the quality rather than the quantity of it. If you have a car park full of Mercedes Goldwing 300 SL, it looks fantastic. It looks better than a car park mixed with Skodas and.
Yeah, no, I get that. No,
so I'm not worried. And if I could, I'm happy to share it with you afterwards, and you can distribute. If you see the very good CGI of that first development, it would put that question at rest because it works in multiples.
Well, I can, if you do share that with me, then I can put it up with the recording. That would be handy. Simon, did you want to come off mute? You probably got more than the one question you've asked there as well. Did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Simon. Nico, just interested in the actual sort of construction of the house and what foundation requirements are necessary.
Okay, interestingly enough, until recently, we had the foundation in with a provisional cost in our bill of quantities. We just decided to take that out. We have a raft foundation, the prototype, and I'll tell you why we decided on that, but the prototype only required a 20 centimeter thin raft foundation here because we have very good soil conditions. As you are aware, when it comes to concrete or raft foundations, it depends very much on the location, on the specifications that's required. And because of this, we actually just decided to put the foundations into the groundworks and take them out of our offering. Also, it's the only thing that we haven't really been innovative or forward thinking about. And the reason for that is the following. Of course, you will be aware of very good up and coming ways of how to do foundations nowadays. I'm personally a big fan of screw pile foundations, helical screw piles, which come all the way back, originate from 1850, where they built all the American lighthouses with screw pile foundations. And so it's marine engineering, it's fantastic. But when you deal here with local authorities, it's still virtually unknown to building control. Also, the distribution system and availability is not in all regions really there. So from a practical point of view, as we did indeed with some other elements of the house, we decided to go a conventional way, a raft foundation, simply because it is more realistic to execute in practical terms for developers and for people. We do investigate for them, on behalf of them, alternatives in terms of having more eco-credentials by using slag or fly ash concrete, which has zero embedded carbon because it's a waste product. And there are some technologies where instead of using rebars, you can throw in metal fiber in the concrete pre-mix. So there are ways to make that raft foundation better, but it is something that really has to be calculated individually every time a geological soil test has been done on the site in question.
What would your preference be, Simon?
No, I mean, I'm just interested to hear really from the standardization standpoint, but also Nico's already sort of picking up on the embodied carbon element.
Mm-hmm.
So I take fully that it's going to be very site variable, and I guess that's sort of picking up on Alex's point a little bit, that the challenge with the product is its performance, both in terms of operation, but also embodied energy, is likely to be impacted to a greater or lesser extent by its site situation. And that's the challenge we have as architects, that we can take a standard product, or we can take the view that we want properties to be predominantly south, north, whatever facing, but then the realities of the site kick in and we're forced into compromise. And I guess that's where we get forced into then designing individual products, notwithstanding the observations that Nico's made, that if I designed an iPhone, it would probably be okay, but it would probably cost thousands and thousands of pounds. So,
well, you see, there is a long-term objective here, and for that I have to compromise in a number of things. Talking quickly about the embedded CO2, or in general the ecological credentials of products, we are very throughout the process we've been very conscious and aware of trying to go as ecologically sound as we can, but at the same token we took a very pragmatic view and choose some products. I'll give you a very main example in a minute, which is our main envelope. Choose some products which are not ideal, but where the performance of the product itself, medium to long term, outweighs the negativity of the embedded CO2. Just simply, I give you one example, and I'll quantify that in a minute. But we have I quantify it now. We have now 20 kilowatt of PV roof, and that in the south of the UK produces on average 18,531 kilowatt per year. That is the equivalent of CO2 stored by 2,000 trees per annum, or 4 tons of CO2. And for that, to achieve that, the zinc panels that we use, which have a hybrid product and have as a core a 2-component PUR, which by no means is great from an environmental point of view. But if I can save the planet per house per annum 4 tons of CO2, I can justify using that material in my mind. So that has been the case with a number of the materials we choose.
No, I understand that, Nico, and I think I've had conversations with other people on this call about Wunderhaus because I'm interested in it, and actually what you're not setting out to replicate the passive house model. You are providing how, in my mind, this is not a sales pitch, and I'm not endorsing anything, but you're providing much better housing stock than what's being provided at the moment, not least because less than 2% of new build homes are low energy. So whatever you're doing is better than what everyone else is doing. And as you said, you have to make compromises. But yeah, and that's my opinion. I'm not looking to sway anyone on this call, but just in terms of, for me, it's better than what everyone else is doing, but bar the passive house guys that were obviously building individual houses. And there are other people that are doing stuff like green core construction around Bicester and all of those areas. There's lots of more, not mass housing, but the guys that are providing more housing stock of much higher quality. So I think it's really interesting. We've actually run out of time now, Nico, because the hours has gone by really, really quickly. It was really, really interesting to hear from you.
I'll just show you one more thing. Hang on a minute. Hang on. This is the final generation of Wunderhaus that you see here. We developed also our own solar roof now, yeah, that's where we are right now. I just want to do one last word. Thank you, because it's important that you understand that. Because thank you for listening and the questions that you had. But the point about not being able to adapt to every location or every situation is absolutely taken. We take another point of view, and we just started this process, which is, I want to achieve this economy of scale. And if I can do this, I had a number of representations to very big councils. The last one was Brentwood in Essex, where I said to them, if you are interested in social or affordable housing, which normally is the definition of which in this country is a lesser quality, lesser architecture, and lesser material content, I can potentially give you award-winning architecture and exceptional performance at the price of social housing and affordable homes. What you have to give me, not you as a single council, but if you can team up with other councils, if you can tell me that you will build 1,000 or 2,000 houses, I can provide you with this award-winning architecture and performance at the cost of social housing. I'm saying that because in order to achieve this, I have to be pretty uncompromising in terms of altering the product at all. So I have to compromise sometimes when it comes to orientation or performance or vista.
Mm-hmm.
Hope that makes sense. But in general, thank you for listening, and sorry that I talked so much in such
That's why we invited you on, for you to talk. So don't apologize for that. No, it's been really interesting. Thank you. Yeah, great to hear from you. Thanks for everyone who's attended the call and the questions. Like I say, I'll upload the recording to Meshwork, and Nico, if you can share the CGIs of that development, that would be fantastic. And Mike, if you can find that Savills research as well, that would be quite handy, because we like to sort of not verify, but if we are going to, I think that would be of interest to lots and lots of people. So if we can find that, that would be great. But thanks for everyone, and Thanks for your time, Nico, and we'll see you on another call. Cheers, guys.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers, Nico. Bye.